Hey, what's up, and welcome back to Interpreting Stars, where today we're bringing it back to our Chucky marathon. If you haven't seen my channel yet, this is my first experience with the Chucky franchise as a whole. I haven't seen any of them before, so I'm completely new to it, almost completely blind too, because I haven't been looking them up, I haven't been watching trailers, haven't been doing any of this. I only knew one thing. Tonally, the films changed from the Child's Play series to the Of Chucky films, and I was looking forward to that because I didn't really care that much, specifically for the tone of Child's Play. Basically, the Child's Play series, that was completely horror. It took itself way too seriously, and I just couldn't get into it. I couldn't believe it, specifically because there was no subtlety about it. When there is no subtlety, there cannot be any suspense, and when there is no suspense, there can't be any horror. There is no rising tension in those films. It just is what it is, which I guess can be seen as part of the era it came out in. But for a modern audience, it doesn't work as well, and I'm glad that they changed it up, because in the newer films, in the Of Chucky films, it finally realizes what it is, ridiculous, and it embraces that. Because if you're gonna forego subtlety, if you're gonna forego suspense and horror, then you might as well realize what you are. And that's what Bride of Chucky does. It realizes how ridiculous the concept is as a whole and just embraces that tenfold, and I love every second of this movie. From the very beginning of this movie, I was on board. There's an evidence locker scene in the very beginning. You see a bunch of horror icon stuff like Jason's mask, Michael Myers' mask, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre chainsaw. You see Freddy Krueger's gloved hand thing. And I'm like, absolutely, that makes perfect sense. I've actually been saying it in my other reviews. Even though I wasn't a huge fan of Child's Play as a whole, I could see how it fit in seamlessly with other horror icons like that. And to see it in an evidence locker with all this other stuff is more of a shout out than anything else, but I love it anyways. And then it goes a little bit further. It shows this woman who's opening a book called Voodoo for Dummies, and I was like, yeah. This movie's gonna be ridiculous, and I love it. And you know what? Apart from the ridiculousness, apart from it finally realizing what it is, finally embracing what it is, apart from that, the movie's actually made pretty well. The first thing that actually stood out to me when I was watching this movie was the musical score. I like the soundtrack for whatever reason. I didn't really care for it in Child's Play 1, 2, or 3, but it finally stood out here. And then it kind of went into it a little bit further, a little bit with the camera work, a little bit with the visuals and editing. Not as much though. It's not explosively noticeable, but it is more noticeable than any of the other Child's Play films out there. It's actually a well-made movie for the most part. And sure, that might have to do something with the decade it takes place in, because this was 10 years after the first movie. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it knows what it needs to be now, and I'm all for it. The plot of this film revolves around a girlfriend that Charles Lee Ray had before he turned into the Chucky doll. She's in this film, she ends up turning into a doll herself, and she and Chucky, they go on an adventure to find the body of Charles Lee Ray when he was buried. He was buried along with an amulet that may allow him to once again transport his soul into a human body. The inclusion of the Bride of Chucky, by the way, was actually brilliant, because Chucky always needed somebody to bounce ideas off of that wasn't against him. And that was something that the other movies kind of missed out on. So I liked the Bride of Chucky element, but I also liked who played her, which was Jennifer Tilly, and I immediately dug her voice. It took me a while to get on board with Brad Dourif's voice specifically, because I didn't think that was amazing ever, but I do now consider his voice to be iconic, but I saw her voice as immediately iconic. She had the perfect voice for the Bride of Chucky. But here's the thing, guys. The movie's not perfect, obviously. The first thing I want to say is that it doesn't feel very theatrical. It feels direct to DVD, direct to digital, whatever. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think for the most part it is better than any of the Child's Play movies out there, but it doesn't feel quite as theatrical. It does feel more like, I don't know, a joke, and not always in the best way. Another problem that I had with this movie was the plot specifically. I mean, it was the same basic idea that Child's Play 1, 2, and 3 had, which was to exchange the soul from one body to the other, to leave the doll's body and go into a human body. Same exact thing as 1, 2, and 3. I mean, they did change things up, which I appreciate. The time limit scene in 1, 2, and 3 has now expired, and now he has to find other means, which, again, I appreciate. But it's still the same motivation. He's still trying to do exactly the same thing, and I've always said he needs to find a new medium. He needs to find something else to be inspired to do. Otherwise, it starts to get a little bit old, a little bit too quickly, And even when it comes down to adding new things in this film, at the end of the day, it was just a MacGuffin that Chucky and the Bride of Chucky were after. It felt forced. It felt like, how can we add a plot to this movie? Oh, we'll just say that the guy was buried with an amulet, and the amulet has even more power than he had originally, which is fine, I guess, but it's totally a MacGuffin. That being said, there are some mirroring aspects that I liked about this film, because it's not just Chucky and the Bride of Chucky. There's this guy and girl who are in a strained relationship as well, and they have this mirroring relationship going on at the same time, and it makes me feel like everybody in the movie actually had a role to play. They all were pretty important into the direction into what everything was happening, which really helped strengthen the narrative of this film, and I actually dug that. Also kind of random, but I really did like how they made Chucky look in this movie. The stitched up face look. That's how I want Chucky to look. That was perfect. He actually looked scary. He looked like a horror movie character. I know this review is kind of all over the place, but the main idea is this movie is self-aware, which is amazing, and that's what I wanted to see from the series from the get-go, because I always saw it as a ridiculous franchise. And if it's going to be ridiculous, be ridiculous. Embrace that ridiculousness, and that's what this movie does. I'm going to give this movie a 79%, 79 out of 100 possible star rating, which is miles better than I rated any of the Child's Play movies. Guys, tell me what you thought of Bride of Chucky in the comments down below. And as for YouTube, make sure that you hit subscribe, like it, and hit the bell to be notified when I come out with my next review. And until then, peace out!